going to continue on with the hammer here, and the next step is to make the tang. Now, you might notice there's no construction lines for the tang, and well, we'll just have to make some. So what I'm looking for is this area is going to be 20 and by 20, I believe here. Well, it says 21, so 10 on either side, and I think we can work with that here. I believe this distance is 21, so what that means is I'm going to make a little arch here that is 10 millimeters high. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to make use of two different views here, my right view and my perspective view. So I'm going to start by drawing a polyline. Just make sure I am on the curves layer. So curve, polyline, polyline. I'm going to snap to this point right here. So this is where I want to start drawing my curve. Now, I want to go straight up in this view right here. So I have my Smart Track turned on. Smart Track is very useful because it predicts where you want to go. So you can see right there, I'm going up 90 degrees on ortho. So I've got that turned on. And how much I want to go up? Well, the distance was 20, so I'm going to go up 10 right here. Okay, so there's my first point, and it's gone up vertically. Now the next thing is I want to come over here to this point, but I want to be straight up above it. So what I'm going to do is hover over top of this point, come back down here, and you can see that my Smart Track has created a reference line for me. And now I can go straight up until I snap to directly across. Now it's not snapping directly across, so I'm going to hold the Shift key down. That tells it to go straight across in ortho mode. Click a point right there, drop down, snap back, and that will finish up my curve. And notice nothing snapped to any other 3D object. That's the useful thing about Smart Track, is it helps, it's very predictive when it does that. So I'm just going to take this curve actually, and I'm going to use this to create the tang curve. And instead of going through creating another control point curve, I'm just going to round this curve off here. And I'll see that by I'm going to go to curve and fillet corners. So fillet corners, if I have a polyline, it will fillet all the corners. I'm going to use a radius of 4, press enter, okay, and that's good right there. That's as good as a control point curve. So that's another way. In the book or in the tutorial, it goes through a little more effort, half a curve and mirror it and so on. This is fine for me right here. I'm happy with this. I'm going to mirror this. A lot of people skip this step and it comes back a little bit later, creates a mistake. Mirror it across this point and this point. So you can see now I have a mirror image on both sides. And I'm going to select that, hold my Shift key down, select that as well, and edit and join. That's also important too. So now I have this rounded rectangle that I'm going to use to create the tang. So this is going to be a sweep to rails curve. So I'm going to go over here to my top view, create the rails, and again, I'm just going to take a look at my measurements here, just see how narrow the neck is. So the neck is 13 millimeters wide here. So what that means is if I'm using this as my guideline, that means that it's going to be 6.5 millimeters across the center line. There's no particular guide point right here. What I can do here though is I'm just going to drop a point object that is, okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5, so right about there. That's a good point object for reference. That's 6.5, so that's going to give me a throat of 13 millimeters wide. And maybe I'll just move that a little closer to the center there. And again, I could be more precise on this, but it seems to be close enough. So curve, now this one uses what's called interpolate points. So interpolate points is going to create a line that goes specifically through the points that are selected. So here's my first point right here. Actually, I was grabbing this corner point right here. I'm going to make sure I'm in perspective, snap on this point right here so I don't go 3D. Click on point snap. I'm going to go down here to point object snap, turn that on, select that point, and then I've also got to make sure to finish off my tang inside of my head. So I'm going to go there, and then I'm going to make sure that I finish it off down in here. And again, I don't want to snap to anything. I want it my planar curve, and press enter. So now it goes through that point. It goes through that point that I picked and that point. So interpolate curve is good if you want to go through specific points. And again, I wanted to make sure this curve went right through into the head, and because the tang has to fit inside of the head. So it's always easier just to go inside a little bit. Make sure you're definitely inside that area. I'm going to take this curve, I'm going to mirror it across this point right here. Okay. And now the last one is I'm going to jump back up to perspective. I'm going to do the sweep to rails here. So surface, sweep to rails, first rail, second rail, cross section curve, press enter, check my seam point, and I'm going to be fussy. I'm going to put my seam point right about here, so it's kind of like right along the middle there. Press enter, and that looks good. Okay. Now, what I want to make sure I also do is I'm going to turn this into a solid. Now, a lot of people have trouble with this because they didn't follow those instructions precisely. A lot of people will make this curve, sweep it, and then try to mirror the surface. I find this way actually works way better. So I'm going to go solid, cap planar holes. Now, if that doesn't work, there's something wrong with your surface. If it does work, great. Then what you can do is you can go solid, union, grab that, try that again, solid, union, that, and that, press enter, and there we go. Those get union together as one whole object. And again, just because I've been doing it all along, I'm going to do that fillet edge here. And let's give it a radius of maybe 2. Okay. I have to set the radius before, so it's got a radius of 1. I'm going to undo that, set it to the radius of 2. There we go. That's a little nicer. Go around and check, just make sure that that fillet edge worked. Yep, that looks good. Okay, and there's the head of my hammer. So the last thing to do is to create the handle and put a little hole in it. So for making the handle, I'm going to jump back to the top view here, and I'm going to grab beyond my curves layer. I'm going to do the control point curve again, starting right here. So now what I want, again, when I get down to here, again, I want a flat base on this. So I'm going to make sure, finish up right there, I'm going to make sure that I've got 2 control points, one just before the end control point, so right here. So what that makes is a flat based handle. All right. And I'm going to mirror that because it's going to be exactly the same on the opposite side. And again, I'm going to do a sweep to rails. I'm going to switch to the handle layer though, because I'm creating a new surface on the handle layer. You notice I didn't switch to the tang layer because I was just going to union it with the head. So if I was going to keep this all as separate parts, then I'd be more fussy about using layers. As a matter of fact, I really should have one whole layer just for this particular part. Let's finish this off. Surface, sweep 2 rails. This rail, this cross section again. So I get to reuse that. And again, I like my seams to be closer to the side there. Press enter and OK. So there's the handle for my hammer. Yours might look a little different. You can see actually this one has a little more rounded on the bottom. I go back. Of course, if that's not exactly what I want, I can delete that rail. I can go back up a couple of steps. I realize my handle looks a little boxy. Maybe I'll delete this point and that point. Move that up a bit. See? So it's actually fairly easy to go back a couple of quick steps. Mirror that. Now try a sweep 2 rails. Rail, rail, cross-section curve, and enter. And again, I like my seams neat and tidy. There we go. That looks a little bit more like it does in the picture. Could have rounded that edge off a bit, but I'm happy with that. Last thing I need to do is to make a hole that is 12 millimeters radius at this point. So let's take a look at that. So here's the center of my cylinder. I'm going to go, well, I'll switch to my cutout layer here, and I'll go solid cylinder, starting at this point right here where those two construction lines cross. Drag that out. I want a radius. I'm going to choose my radius of 12. That looks a little big. Actually, that looks very big. I don't think that's a radius of 12. I think that's a diameter of 12 because it certainly does not match the picture. So I'm going to use my own judgment. Make a radius of 6. That actually looks better. That's closer there. I don't think that's the correct number there. So radius of 6, end of cylinder. I'm going to do both sides. Yes. Drag my cylinder out. Let's refresh my views here. Okay. Solid. Oh, actually, first of all, this is a surface. And again, I can see if I take a look at my object, it's a surface. And the reason it's a surface is because when I did that sweep 2 rails, this was open at the top. And if I hide the top here, you can see, yep, that's a surface. And what I really would like to do, if I do a Boolean difference, it might work, it might not, but it will leave a hollow shell in here. I'd rather make that a solid. So differences, solid differences usually work best with solids. Sometimes they work with surfaces. So I'm going to cap planar holes. There we go. That is the little hole that got capped. And now I have a closed solid poly surface, which is what I want. Solid difference. That I want to keep. That I want to get rid of. And there we go. So it makes a nice little hole in there. And the last thing for this is to fillet the edge. And let's stick with our radius of 2 is good. Okay. Fillets the edge quite nicely. And again on the bottom here, fillet edge. All right. And bring my, and there we have our hammer. So the next video, I'm just going to spend a couple minutes rendering it, but happy with that one.